Good morning, dear sisters and brothers. The reading from 2 Peter stood out to me as I prepared this homily for this second Sunday in Advent, especially this verse. It's written, "Therefore, beloved, while you are waiting for these things, strive to be found by Him at peace." Now, I'm speaking to a camera at an empty church during Advent in the midst of a global pandemic. And my heart yearns to be with you again, to have you around the altar. Therefore, beloved, while you're waiting for these things, strive to be found by Him at peace. I know from my week of being in contact with some of you, it's a tough time. Some of you have loved ones in hospital and had to make the difficult choice of having only one visitor. You are waiting for a time when friends and family can freely visit the hospital again. Therefore, beloved, while you are waiting for these things, strive to be found by Him at peace. Some of you have sick children, and your hearts are bursting with love and also with concern. You're waiting for the deep pain to stop. Therefore, beloved, while you're waiting for these things, strive to be found by Him at peace. I anointed a man this week as he prepared to pass from this life to the next, with his wife of 68 years kneeling on the floor beside his fragile body in the bed. Therefore, beloved, while you're waiting for these things, strive to be found by Him at peace. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We're waiting for the word bubble to be associated with children playing on a summer afternoon rather than the number of people we're legally allowed to gather with. Therefore, beloved, while you're waiting for these things, strive to be found by Him at peace. Advent is a season specifically geared toward reflecting on the grace that simply comes from waiting. There's a stillness in waiting if we decide not to take out our phones and scroll mindlessly through stuff. If we choose to put our distractions aside for just a moment, a time to simply wait. Our culture, for better and for worse, has shaped us to be effective, goal-oriented, and to simply get things done. But at some point in our lives, can we simply pause to think about what we're doing, or why we're doing it, or perhaps just simply to consider what we're thankful for? At a certain point, we simply have to wait. It's good to wait. It's good to be bored every once in a while. It's good to simply take the time to be silent, to pray, to put ourselves outside the demands of time and busy schedules, and to simply wait. When Jesus called me into the priesthood, I admit now that I can look back and say that I wasn't ready. I needed to wait. I needed to form my inner life. I needed to learn how to wait and how to listen. After years of learning to be a pilgrim, totally dependent on God for everything, I can still honestly say that I'm not ready for whatever is next. Yes, I am ready to say yes. Yes, Lord, if that's where you're leading, that's where I shall go. So I'm ready to say yes, but I really have no idea what that means. And so I wait, deepening in these disciplines of waiting. Waiting is a time to prepare the inner life to receive whatever God has to offer. I asked a teenager this week what he thought about waiting, and this was his response. He said, "It depends what I'm waiting for. If I'm waiting for something good, it feels longer. Advent is an invitation to enter into this waiting period in expectation for something good, for the satiation of our deepest longings. Dorothy Day, a Catholic social activist, her activist activities span basically from the 1930s to the 1970s. She said this: Advent is a time of waiting, of expectation, of silence, waiting for our Lord to be born. A pregnant woman is so happy, so content. She lives in such a garment of silence, and it is as though she were listening to hear the stir of the life within her. Are you waiting for the stir of deep life within you? This deep life that's groaning to be birthed. The waiting, however, of course, is followed by the delivery process. New life doesn't come about easily. Labor pains cause women to cry out with pain, a pain that's so deep it cannot be endured in silence. The screams of pain precede new life. What are we waiting for? Well, I would challenge you to think about that. Do you want to go back to the myopic, insatiable greed of materialism? A culture marked by injustice? A parish whose goal seems to be keeping a building open by bingo and fundraisers? Do you want your pain to be the scream of denying the reality of death, or the guttural cry for a future of hope? New creation is not an idealistic moan of the romantic, but a deep cry to God, a guttural cry to God. Deep cries unto deep. As Christians, our question is not so much what we are waiting for, but who. Who are we waiting for? Who will satiate our deepest longings? I know it's a tough time, and I admit that sometimes this phase of new birth may feel like a really bad case of morning sickness. I get it. As a priest, I have no interest in closing buildings. The thought of it makes me sick, to be honest. But if we are to birth something new, something life-giving, we need to make healthy decisions about the future of our body and the new life we are carrying. I have heard the screams of some of you who are angry about buildings being winterized and the talk of what our future could be as one new parish. There are cries of anguish, cries from a deep pain of letting go of the familiar, the known, as it's being torn away. There are cries of anger and also cries from those who continue to point to our long-awaited Messiah, those in our midst today who, like John the Baptist from our gospel today, simply say, "Prepare the way of the Lord." Who are you waiting for? The church needs to remember that our groans in the midst of despair must groan for hope, not from a place of abandon, but from a place of embrace. It may feel like a forsaken groan, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Of course, Jesus said those very words from the cross. It was a cry from God that did not hide from pain, from suffering, and from the consequences of injustice. Jesus' followers run toward pain, run toward suffering and injustice, which robs the pain of its capacity to disorder, but reorders it around love and justice and healing. How do we do this? How do we groan? What does an Advent groan sound like? How do we embrace the Advent season to help us groan, to help us mourn, to help us let go, to help us run toward love and justice and healing, to help us prepare the way of the Lord, to help us allow Christ to be rebirthed in us, to encourage Christ to be rebirthed in our relationships, and to enable Christ to be reborn in our parish. What can that look like as we navigate Advent in the midst of a COVID lockdown with our buildings closed and empty? Let me offer you 3 suggestions. First, we're forced to wait many times throughout the day. One of the most common for us in this developed Western world is forced to being stopped at a red light. How about this? For the remainder of Advent, when you're at a red light, why not bring to mind something that you're thankful for? And thank God for what it is. Say it out loud. Pretty soon you'll be thanking God for red lights because it gives you a chance to reflect on something for which you are thankful. You'll be thankful for that which caused you to slow down and wait. Secondly, it takes me about 5 minutes in the morning to boil the kettle and to make my morning cup of tea. Why not, as you make your coffee or tea, have a seat, sit down, ask God, what are you trying to birth in me? Help me to know what new life you are trying to bring about in me. Maybe this brief time of recollection will cause you to desire to spend more time in recollection, more time in prayer. I'd be very curious to know what comes up. And thirdly, peace and tranquility are hardly words that describe the world we live in. Likewise, our inner lives can become disordered, and we can carry around deep wounds and guilt and even shame. This Advent, I invite you to help loosen the load by considering returning to the sacrament of reconciliation, confession. Father James and I will be here Friday evening, December the 18th, and all day Saturday on December the 19th. If you haven't made confession to a priest in a long time, or if you're embarrassed that you don't know how, don't worry about it. Come in, sit down with Father James and I, and we'll talk you through it. There's a deep grace that flows through confession. Your time waiting and reflecting and being grateful will help you make a good confession and open you up to the beauty of God's mercy. I hope these 3 suggestions help you deepen in a peace that surpasses all understanding this Advent season. Jesus didn't promise that life would be easy. He did give us the assurance of peace in the midst of it all. Therefore, beloved, while you're waiting for these things, strive to be found by Him at peace.